You should never hear a stranger answer your thoughts, I whispered to myself, pacing the length of my 600-square-foot apartment for the third time that night, the floor creaking softly under my bare feet, rain tapping steadily against the window like a clock counting down to something I couldn't name. I had a habit of talking out loud when I was stressed, little things, reminders, unfinished conversations with people who weren't there. It made the silence feel less heavy, less like it was watching me back. Okay, Emily, just finish the project, send the file, go to sleep, I muttered, running a hand through my hair as my laptop screen glowed on the kitchen counter, casting long shadows across the room. Everything was normal, painfully normal, until a voice that wasn't mine answered from somewhere behind the front door. Low, steady, unmistakably real. Keep talking. I like your voice. I froze, every muscle locking at once, my breath caught halfway in my chest. I didn't move, didn't blink, didn't even dare turn around at first because my brain refused to accept what my ears had just heard. There was no call open, no video playing, no neighbor close enough for their voice to sound like it was inches away. Just me, alone, like I had been every night for the past 2 years. Except I wasn't alone anymore. I forced myself to turn, slowly, heart pounding so loud. It drowned out the rain, staring at the front door as if it might move on its own. Nothing, just the cheap wood panel and the faint shadow of the hallway light seeping through the crack beneath it. Hello. I called out, hating how small my voice sounded. The kind of small that felt like prey. Silence answered me, thick and heavy, pressing in from every corner of the room. I took a step forward, then another, telling myself there had to be an explanation, a prank, a misunderstanding, anything but what it felt like. My fingers brushed the edge of the counter as I moved, grounding myself in something solid, something real. I checked my phone. No active calls, no open apps, nothing that could explain. A voice speaking directly to me. Then I noticed it, the tiny green light beside my laptop camera, glowing steady in the dim room. My stomach dropped. I hadn't turned it on. I knew I hadn't. I never left it on. Not after everything I'd read about people watching through screens. A cold wave crept up my spine, slow and deliberate, like it had all the time in the world. That's not funny, I said, louder now, forcing strength into my voice that I didn't feel, stepping toward the door, because if someone was out there, if this was some kind of twisted joke, I needed to see them. Needed to prove to myself that this was real and not something worse. My hand hovered over the handle, inches away, when the voice came again, closer this time, right on the other side, like he was leaning against the wood, listening to every breath I took. I've been listening to you, he said, softer now, almost thoughtful, and in that moment, I understood something that made my chest tighten. This wasn't random. This wasn't a mistake. Whoever he was, he knew me, not my name, not yet, but the way I moved, the way I spoke when I thought no one was there, the quiet parts of me I never showed anyone else. And somehow, that was more terrifying than anything else he could have said. I did not open the door. I could not. My hand stayed frozen inches from the handle, while my mind raced through every possible explanation that made sense, and none of them did, because no explanation accounted for the way his voice felt, controlled, patient, like he had been here longer than I had noticed, like he was not in a hurry at all. What do you want? I asked, forcing the words out even as my throat tightened. Silence answered me for a second that stretched too long, then a soft exhale on the other side, almost amused. You already gave me what I wanted, he said, and something in my chest dropped, because I did not understand what that meant, not fully, but I felt it, the weight of it. I took a step back from the door, then another, needing space, needing distance from something I could not see. My eyes darted to the laptop again, that tiny green light still glowing like it was watching me breathe, watching me think. Turn that off, I whispered, more to myself than to him. But the light did not move, did not flicker, it just stayed there, steady, deliberate, like it belonged. You talk a lot when you are nervous, he continued, his voice quieter now, closer somehow, even though the door had not moved. You pace exactly 12 steps from the couch to the counter. Then you stop. Then you start again. My stomach twisted, because he was right. Every word, every detail, things no one should know, things I barely noticed about myself. Stop, I said quickly, sharper now, but it came out thin, fragile, nothing like the command I wanted it to. B. You hum when you forget the words, he added, almost thoughtfully, and I felt my face heat with a strange mix of fear and something else I did not want to name. Because this was not just someone watching. This was someone studying, memorizing, collecting pieces of me I never offered. I shook my head, backing away until my legs hit the edge of the couch, grounding myself again. You need to leave, I said, more firmly this time, gripping the back of the couch to steady my hands. I am calling the police. The words sounded stronger than I felt, like I was borrowing courage from a version of myself that did not exist right now. There was a pause, long enough that I thought maybe he had gone. Maybe this was over. Maybe I had imagined all of it. Then the door handle turned, slow, deliberate, the soft click echoing louder than it should have. My breath stopped as the door opened just enough for the hallway light to spill into my apartment. And then he stepped inside, not rushed, not aggressive, just calm, controlled, like crossing a threshold he had already decided was his. He closed the door behind him with a quiet click that sounded final in a way I could not explain. And for the first time, I saw him, tall, composed, dressed like he belonged somewhere far more expensive than my small apartment. His presence filled the room without effort, like the air itself adjusted around him. His eyes found mine instantly, dark, steady, unreadable, and I realized something that made my pulse spike even harder. He was not looking around, not scanning the space. He already knew it, every inch, every corner, every place I could try to run. You were about to call someone, he said, tilting his head slightly. Not a question, just an observation. I swallowed, forcing myself to hold his gaze even as my instincts screamed to look away. Yes, I answered, because lying felt useless, impossible, like he would hear it before I even finished the word. A faint hint of something crossed his expression, not anger, not exactly, something closer to interest. You can, he said calmly, gesturing lightly toward my phone on the counter. But it will not change anything. And somehow, that quiet certainty was more unsettling than any threat could have been, because it meant he was not worried, not about me, not about what I might do next. And for the first time that night, I realized I was not the one in control of anything anymore. I did not reach for my phone, even though it was right there, even though he had just told me I could, because something in the way he said it made it feel like a test I had already failed. My fingers tightened against the edge of the couch as I tried to slow my breathing, but it came out uneven. Anyway, too fast, too loud in the quiet space between us. He noticed, of course he did. His eyes flicked to my hands, then back to my face, not invasive, not rushed, just observant in a way that made me feel transparent, like there was nothing I could hide even if I tried. You are deciding, he said, his voice calm, almost analytical, whether running, calling, or staying still will give you the best outcome. I swallowed, my throat dry, because he was right again. He was always right, and I hated that more than I could explain. And I managed to ask, forcing the word out even as my chest tightened. Which one works? For a moment, he did not answer. He just studied me, his gaze steady, unblinking, like he was measuring something I could not see. Then he took a single step closer, not enough to corner me, but enough to change the air between us. Enough that I felt it. The shift, subtle but undeniable. None of them, he said quietly, and something in his tone made it sound less like a threat and more like a fact. I shook my head, a small, instinctive motion, because I refused to accept that, refused to believe I had no control here. You do not get to just walk in here and decide that, I said, my voice stronger now, steadier, drawing something sharp from the fear that had been building inside me. For the first time, there was a pause in him, a fraction of a second where his expression changed. Not much, just a slight narrowing of his eyes, a flicker of something that almost looked like interest. No, he said after a moment. You already decided it. I frowned, confusion cutting through the fear. What does that even mean? I asked, and this time, when he moved, it was not toward me, but toward the kitchen counter, toward my laptop. My pulse jumped as he reached out. Not touching it, just hovering his hand near the glowing screen, the small green light reflecting faintly against his fingers. You stayed, he said, glancing back at me. You heard a voice that should not exist, and you stayed long enough to ask questions. I opened my mouth to argue, to say that I had not stayed by choice, that I had been frozen. But the words caught in my throat because I knew how that sounded, because part of me knew he was not entirely wrong. Most people run, he continued, his voice softer now, almost thoughtful. They grab their keys, their phone, whatever they can, and they leave without looking back. His gaze held mine again, steady, searching. You did not. I exhaled slowly, trying to steady myself, trying to find something solid to hold on to in the middle of everything that felt like it was slipping. Maybe. I was in shock. I said, quieter now. And for the first time, something in his expression shifted again, not dismissive, not mocking, just considering, like he was turning the idea over in his mind. Maybe, he said, but there was no agreement in it. Only observation. The rain outside grew louder for a moment, hitting the windows in uneven bursts, filling the silence that stretched between us. I became aware of how close he was to the door, how easily he could block it if he wanted to, how the space behind me narrowed with every step I had taken back. And then, without warning, he said, "This apartment," his gaze drifting briefly around the room, not scanning, not searching, just acknowledging. "It belonged to someone else before you." My stomach tightened, confusion replacing fear for a split second. "What?" I asked, caught off guard. "What are you talking about?" His eyes returned to mine, sharper now, more focused. "You signed the lease 6 months ago," he said, like he had read it himself, like he had been there when I did. "The man before you left in a hurry." A pause, just long enough to make my chest tighten again. He should not have. Something cold slid down my spine, slow and deliberate, because I understood then, not everything, not yet, but enough to know that whatever had brought him here, whatever had made him listen through my walls, through my door, it had nothing to do with me at the start, and everything to do with where I was standing now. And somehow, that made it worse. The air in the room felt different after he said that. Heavier somehow, like the walls had shifted around me without moving at all. I stared at him, trying to connect the pieces, trying to understand how my quiet, ordinary life had somehow intersected with something I did not belong in. "I do not know who you think lived here before me," I said slowly, choosing each word carefully. "But I just signed a lease. That is it. I have nothing to do with whatever you are looking for." My voice held more strength now, not because I felt safe, but because confusion had begun to replace the sharp edge of fear. He watched me for a moment, silent, as if weighing the truth of what I said against something only he could see. Then he stepped further into the apartment, his gaze drifting briefly across the bookshelf, the small dining table, the scattered notes on the counter, not searching, just confirming, like he had already memorized this space long before tonight. "I know," he said finally, and those 2 words unsettled me more than anything else he had said so far, because they meant he believed me. Or worse, he already knew I was not involved. "Then why are you here?" I asked, my voice sharper now, frustration cutting through the tension. "If I am not who you are looking for, then you should leave." The words felt bold, almost reckless, but I needed to say them, needed to draw some kind of line, even if it meant nothing to him. For a second, there was something like a pause in the room, not silence, but a shift, like the moment before something changes direction. He turned his head slightly, studying me again, more carefully this time, like I had become something unexpected. "Because you stayed," he repeated, quieter now, and I exhaled in disbelief, shaking my head. "That does not make any sense," I said, almost laughing, but there was no humor in it, only tension. "People freeze. That does not mean anything." He took another step, slow, deliberate, closing just enough distance that I could feel the presence of him more clearly, the subtle scent of something clean and expensive, the controlled way he moved, every motion precise, intentional. "It means you listen," he said, and his voice changed, just slightly, less distant, more focused. "And people who listen notice things." My pulse picked up again, not as sharply as before, but steady, persistent, because I could feel where this was going even if I did not want to admit it. "I do not know anything," I said quickly, too quickly, and I knew he caught it the second the words left my mouth. His gaze sharpened, not threatening, just attentive. "Not yet," he corrected, and that single phrase settled into the room like something inevitable. I swallowed, my mind racing, trying to find an angle, a way out, something that gave me control again, even a little. Then this is simple, I said, forcing calm into my voice. I leave. I forget everything you. Find whoever you are actually looking for. I held his gaze, refusing to look away this time, refusing to shrink back, because if I did, I knew I would lose whatever ground I had just gained. He was quiet for a long moment, longer than before, and in that silence, I noticed something I had not before. He was not tense, not rushed, not reacting. He was deciding, and that realization sent a slow chill through me, because it meant everything that happened next depended on a choice I could not influence. Finally, he spoke, his voice steady, measured. If it were that simple, he said, almost softly, you would not be standing here right now. My breath caught, just slightly, because I understood what he meant before he even continued. The man who lived here did not leave without leaving something behind. His eyes held mine, unblinking. And now, so have you. My chest tightened, confusion flashing again, sharper this time. I have not done anything, I said, but even as I spoke, doubt crept in, subtle, unwelcome, because I thought about the conversations I had had out loud, the things I said when I thought no one was listening, the small details of my life I had never considered important, and the way he had repeated them back to me like they mattered, like they were pieces of something bigger. You spoke, he said simply, and for the first time, there was something in his tone that almost sounded certain, almost final, and I listened. The rain outside softened, fading into the background as the weight of his words settled in, and I realized with a slow, sinking clarity that this was no longer about the person who used to live here. It was about me now. Whether I wanted it to be or not, the words stayed in the air long after he said them, pressing against my chest in a way I could not ignore. I spoke, and he listened. It sounded simple, almost harmless, but nothing about this felt simple anymore. I took a slow breath, forcing my thoughts to line up, because panic was not going to help me now, not with him standing there, watching every reaction like it meant something. Then tell me what you think I said that matters so much, I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. And that seemed to catch his attention more than anything else I had done, a faint shift in his expression, not surprise exactly, but recognition, like I had stepped into a space he had not planned for. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he moved slightly to the side, his gaze drifting toward the window where the rain had softened into a quiet rhythm, as if he was replaying something in his mind, something I had said without knowing anyone was listening. You talk about details, he said finally, his voice low, measured. Small things you think no one notices. My brows pulled together, confusion flickering again. Everyone does that, I replied, but even as I said it, I knew he was going somewhere with this. His head tilted slightly, just enough to show he disagreed. Not like you, he said, and there was something different in his tone now, something sharper, more certain. You repeat patterns, you question them, you connect things that most people ignore. My pulse picked up, not from fear this time, but from something else, something uneasy and unfamiliar, because he was not describing random observations anymore. He was describing the way I thought, the way I processed the world when I believed no one was paying attention. You make it sound like that is a problem, I said, quieter now. Watching him carefully, he turned his attention back to me, his gaze steady, unwavering. It becomes one when those details are not supposed to be connected, he said, and a chill moved through me, slow and deliberate. I tried to think back, to replay the things I had said out loud over the past few days, the small comments, the half-formed thoughts, the observations I never intended to share. My mind raced through them, searching for something, anything that could explain what he meant. I talk about work, about errands, about forgetting to buy groceries, I said, almost defensively. That is it. But the words felt weak even to me, because I knew that was not all. I knew there were moments, late at night, when I said things just to fill the silence, things I did not fully think through, things that did not seem important at the time. His eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in focus. 2 nights ago, he said, and my stomach tightened instantly. You mentioned a delivery that never arrived. My breath caught, because I remembered that. I remembered standing right where I was now, frustrated over a missing package, talking to myself about how the tracking number made no sense, how it showed stops that did not line up with the route, how it looked like the package had been rerouted more than once. That was just a mistake, I said quickly, But he did not react, did not interrupt, just watched me, waiting. You listed 3 locations. He continued, his voice even, precise. And you said they formed a pattern. The room felt smaller suddenly, the walls closer, the air thinner, because I remembered that too. The way I had laughed it off, the way I had said it sounded like something out of a crime show, something that did not belong in real life. It was nothing, I insisted, but the certainty I wanted was not there, not anymore. He took a step closer, not enough to crowd me, just enough to make sure I could not ignore him. It was not nothing, he said quietly, and this time, there was no room for doubt in his voice. It was something you were not supposed to notice. My heart started to pound again, louder, heavier, because the pieces were starting to shift, starting to connect in ways I did not want them to. And for the first time since he walked in, I realized this was not about what I had done. It was about what I had seen without realizing it mattered. And the worst part was, I did not know how much I had already given away. The room went quiet again after he said that. But it was not the same kind of silence as before. This one felt sharper, like something had just been uncovered and neither of us could pretend it had not happened. I could hear my own breathing, uneven, too loud in my ears, as I tried to replay that moment in my head. The delivery, the tracking number, the pattern I had joked about like it was nothing, because it had felt like nothing at the time. Just a glitch, just another small inconvenience in a long list of ordinary problems. It was just a package, I said, but my voice lacked the certainty I wanted it to have. And he heard it immediately. Of course he did. He always did. No, he said quietly, and there was no hesitation in it, no doubt. Just a calm certainty that settled into the space between us. It was not. I shook my head, taking a small step back, trying to create distance again, trying to think clearly, because this was getting out of control. This was turning into something I did not understand. Even if it was something, I did not do anything with it. I said quickly. I did not report it. I did not tell anyone. I forgot about it the same night. His gaze stayed on me, steady, unblinking, like he was measuring the truth in every word. You did not forget, he said, and the way he said it made my chest tighten. You repeated it 3 times. My stomach dropped, because I remembered that too, the way I had gone over the numbers again and again, trying to make sense of them out loud, like saying them would somehow make them clearer. I had thought it was harmless, just me talking to myself, just noise to fill the quiet. You said the locations out loud. He continued, his voice calm, almost detached, like he was listing facts instead of revealing something that made my pulse spike. You said them slowly, like you were memorizing them. I pressed my lips together, my mind racing, trying to find something to hold on to, something that gave me control again. So what? I said, forcing the words out. They are just addresses. That does not mean anything. For a moment, he did not respond, and that pause felt heavier than anything else, because it meant he was deciding what to say next, what to reveal, and I had no idea how far this went. They are not just addresses, he said finally, and there was something different in his tone now, something quieter, but more serious. They are points, he added, points that connect. My chest tightened again, the unease growing into something sharper, something that felt dangerously close to understanding. Connect to what? I asked, and I hated how small my voice sounded again, how quickly the confidence I had tried to build slipped away. He took a slow breath, his gaze shifting briefly toward the door, as if acknowledging something beyond it, something I could not see, then back to me. To movements, he said, to routes that are not supposed to be obvious. I felt my fingers tighten against the couch again, grounding myself as everything he said started to settle into place in a way I did not want it to, because I had seen that pattern. Even if I did not understand it at the time, I had noticed something that was not meant to be noticed, and I had said it out loud, where someone like him could hear it. I did not know. I said, quieter now, because that was the truth, the only thing I was sure of in that moment. I was not trying to figure anything out. His eyes stayed on mine, and for the first time, there was something there I could not immediately read. Not just control, not just calculation. Something more complex, something that made my pulse steady in a different way, slower, more aware. I know, he said, and those 2 words landed differently this time. Not unsettling, not cold, just certain. That is why you are still here. My breath caught, just slightly, because I understood what he meant before he explained it. Because if I had known, if I had meant to uncover something, this moment would not be happening like this. It would be something else entirely, something worse. And yet, I was still standing here, still breathing, still trying to understand. Then what happens now? I asked, and the question felt heavier than anything else I had said so far, because I knew the answer mattered in a way I could not undo. He was quiet for a long moment, longer than before, his gaze steady, focused, like he was looking past me, through me, at something only he could see. And when he finally spoke, his voice was softer, but no less certain. Now, he said, you stop talking when you are alone. The words hung there, simple, almost reasonable, but something in them felt final. Like a line had just been drawn, and I did not know which side of it I was on anymore. His words stayed with me, echoing louder than they should have, because they sounded simple, almost like advice, but nothing about this felt optional. Nothing about this felt like a suggestion. I let out a slow breath, trying to steady myself, trying to think past the weight of everything he had just said. You are telling me to change how I exist in my own apartment, I said, my voice quieter now, but sharper, more controlled. And for the first time, I saw something shift in him again. Not resistance, not annoyance, just awareness, like he recognized the line I was trying to draw. I am telling you to survive in it, he replied, just as calm, just as certain, and that word settled differently. Survive, not live, not stay, survive. I swallowed, the reality of that pressing in harder than anything else so far, because it meant this was not over when he walked out that door, if he walked out that door. And if I do not? I asked, holding his gaze, refusing to look away even as my pulse picked up again. He was quiet for a moment, not because he did not have an answer, but because he did not need to rush into it. And that told me everything I needed to know. Then you will keep noticing things, he said finally, his voice low, steady. And eventually, someone else will notice you. A chill moved through me, slower this time, deeper, because that made sense in a way I could not argue with. This was not just about him. It never had been. There were other people, other forces I could not see, and I had already stepped too close to something I did not understand. I exhaled slowly, forcing my shoulders to relax, even if it was only on the surface, because I needed to regain something, even a small piece of control. You are assuming I will stay, I said, tilting my head slightly, testing the idea out loud. I can leave tonight, find somewhere else, start over. The words sounded solid, practical, like a solution I could hold on to, but he did not react the way I expected. No immediate dismissal, no correction, just a quiet observation. You could, he said, and that alone made my chest tighten, because he was not stopping me, not directly. But patterns do not disappear when you move, he added, his eyes steady on mine. They follow what you already noticed. I frowned, confusion flickering again, because I did not want to accept that, did not want to believe this had already attached itself to me in a way I could not escape. I did not do anything, I said again, softer now, more to myself than to him, because I needed to hear it, needed to believe it still mattered. No, he agreed. And this time there was something almost reassuring in his tone, something grounded. You did not. A small silence followed, and in it, I realized something that shifted the tension in a different direction. He was not here to punish me, not here to accuse me. He was here because of what I might become in this situation, not what I had already done. Then why are you helping me? I asked before I could stop myself, the question slipping out, honest and unguarded. Because none of this made sense otherwise. He paused, just slightly, and for the first time since he walked in, there was something in his expression that was harder to define, not hesitation, not exactly, but something less certain, like this answer was not as simple as the others. Because you are not supposed to be part of this, he said finally, his voice quieter now, less distant, and I prefer to keep it that way. I studied him, really looked this time, past the control, past the precision, searching for something real in the way he held himself, the way he chose his words. And I realized something that unsettled me in a completely different way. He was not lying, not about this. So this is it, I asked, my voice steady again. I just pretend I never noticed anything, never said anything, and everything goes back to normal. The word normal felt strange now, distant, like it belonged to someone else's life. He held my gaze for a long moment, and this time, when he spoke, there was no softness in it, no room for interpretation. "No," he said quietly. "Nothing goes back to normal." And the certainty in that single sentence settled deeper than anything else he had said, because it meant this moment had already changed something. Whether I understood it yet or not, nothing goes back to normal. The words stayed with me, heavier than anything else he had said, because they did not sound like a warning. They sounded like a conclusion, like something had already been decided long before I understood I was part of it. I drew in a slow breath, forcing my thoughts to settle, because panic was no longer useful. It had already passed, leaving something sharper behind, something more focused. Then what does it become? I asked, my voice quieter now, but steadier. And for the first time, he did not answer right away. His gaze held mine. But there was a pause, a fraction of hesitation that had not been there before, like the question itself had shifted something. "It becomes something you are aware of," he said finally, and the answer felt incomplete, like he was only giving me part of it. I frowned slightly, taking a small step to the side, testing the space, testing him. He did not move to block me, did not react at all, and that in itself felt deliberate, like he was letting me believe I had room. "That is not an answer," I said, my tone sharper now, pushing back in a way I had not dared to before. His eyes followed me, calm, steady, but there was something different there now, something that acknowledged the shift. "It is the only one that matters," he replied, and I let out a quiet breath, shaking my head slightly, because I was starting to see it, starting to understand the shape of this in a way that made everything feel more real, more dangerous. "You are not here just to warn me," I said slowly, watching him closely. "You are here to make sure I do not become a problem." The words settled between us, and this time, he did not deny them, did not correct me. He just watched, and that was enough. That silence said more than anything else could have. I felt something shift inside me then. Not fear, not exactly. Something steadier, something that pushed back instead of pulling away. "And if I decide I do not like that?" I asked, tilting my head slightly, meeting his gaze without hesitation, because if nothing was going back to normal, then I needed to understand where I stood, not just what he expected from me. A faint change crossed his expression, subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there, a flicker of something that looked like interest again, like I had said something worth noting. "You already decided you do not like it," he said quietly, and there was something almost certain in the way he said it. Like he had been expecting this, like it was part of whatever pattern he had already mapped out. I exhaled slowly, glancing briefly toward the door, then back to him, because I realized something then that I had not fully considered before. He had walked in without hesitation, without asking, without fear of what might happen, which meant one thing: he did not see me as a threat. Not yet. "Then why are you still standing here?" I asked, my voice calm now, controlled in a way that felt new, even to me. "If I am not supposed to be part of this, then you should have left already." The words hung there, quiet but deliberate, and for a moment, the room felt different again, not tense, not exactly, but balanced in a way it had not been before. He studied me, really studied me this time, like he was seeing something he had not expected to find, something that had not been there when he first walked through the door. "Because you are not reacting the way you should," he said finally, and that answer settled deeper than I expected, because it meant I had already shifted something in his understanding, something I could not see yet, but could feel. I let out a small breath, almost a quiet laugh, though there was no humor in it, just awareness. "Maybe I stopped being predictable the moment you walked in," I said, and for the first time, there was a pause in him that felt different, not calculated, not controlled, just a brief moment where something did not follow the pattern he expected. And in that space, I realized something that changed everything again. This was not just about me being watched, or controlled, or warned. This was something else now, something neither of us had planned, and somehow, that made it even more dangerous than before. The shift between us lingered, quiet but undeniable, like something invisible had tilted, and neither of us could ignore it anymore. I watched him carefully, studying the way he held himself, the way his gaze stayed steady but not rigid, like he was recalibrating something in real time. And that realization settled into me with a strange kind of clarity, He had expected control, predictability, a situation he could manage without resistance, and now that expectation had cracked, even if only slightly. "You are adjusting," I said before I could stop myself, the words slipping out, and, for a brief second, his expression stilled in a way that confirmed it. Not surprise, not exactly, but recognition, like I had named something he had not intended to show. "You notice more than you should," he replied, but there was no edge to it, no warning, just a statement that felt closer to acknowledgement than anything else. I let out a slow breath, crossing my arms lightly, not defensive, just grounding. "You said that already," I said, holding his gaze. "The difference is now you are the one reacting to it." The silence that followed was not empty. It was full, charged with something I could not fully define, but I could feel it, the subtle shift in balance, the way the space between us no longer felt entirely one-sided. He took a step, not closer, not farther, just enough to reposition himself slightly, like he was rethinking where he stood, and that small movement told me more than anything else could have. "You are trying to understand me," he said, his voice low, measured, and I tilted my head slightly, considering that, because he was not wrong. "No," I replied after a moment. "I am trying to understand why you are still here." The words landed differently this time, not as a challenge, but as a question that mattered more than anything else. Because if this was just about warning me, he would have left already. If this was just about control, he would not still be standing here watching me like I was something new, something unexpected. His gaze held mine, and for the first time, there was a flicker of something I had not seen before, something less calculated, more deliberate in a different way, like he was choosing his next words more carefully than before. "Because you changed the outcome," he said finally, and my chest tightened slightly at that, not from fear, but from the weight of it. "I did not do anything," I said again, but softer now, because I was starting to understand that this was not about actions in the way I had been thinking. It was about presence, about reaction, about something less visible but just as real. "You stayed," he repeated, but this time, the words carried something different, not just observation, but consequence. I exhaled slowly, looking down for a brief second before meeting his gaze again, because I needed to see this clearly, needed to understand it fully. "So now what?" I asked, and there was no hesitation in my voice this time, no uncertainty, just a direct question that demanded a real answer. The rain outside had almost stopped now, leaving only a faint, steady drip against the window, filling the silence that stretched between us. He did not respond immediately, and that pause felt intentional, like he was giving the moment space to settle, to become something final before he spoke. "Now," he said quietly, "I decide whether you remain uninvolved." The words were calm, controlled, but they landed with a weight that pressed into my chest, because they confirmed what I had already begun to suspect. This was not just about me avoiding something anymore. This was about him choosing what happened next, and for the first time, I realized something that changed the way I looked at him entirely. This was not a man reacting to a situation. This was a man shaping it, adjusting it, deciding its direction in real time. And somehow, I had become part of that decision whether I wanted to or not. I held his gaze, steady, unflinching, because if he was deciding, then I needed to understand what that meant for me, not just now, but after he walked out that door. "And if I do not want that choice to be yours?" I asked, my voice calm, controlled in a way that felt unfamiliar but necessary. And this time, when the silence came, it felt different again, deeper, more deliberate, like something had just been placed on the table that could not be taken back. His eyes stayed on mine, unreadable for a long moment. And when he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than before, but no less certain. "Then you are already more involved than you think." And that answer settled into the room like something inevitable, something I could not step away from anymore. No matter how much I wanted to, the words settled between us like something final, something that could not be undone. And for a moment, I just stood there, feeling the weight of it press into my chest, because he was right, whether I wanted to admit it or not. I had already crossed a line I did not see when I stepped over it. I let out a slow breath, steadying myself, because if this was no longer about avoiding involvement, then I needed to understand exactly where I stood. "Then explain it," I said, my voice calm, more controlled than before. If I am already involved, then tell me what that actually means. He watched me closely, his gaze sharp, measuring, like he was deciding how much to reveal, and that hesitation told me something important. There were limits to what he wanted me to know, but I had already pushed past the point where silence was an option. It means you are aware of something that exists beneath the surface, he said finally, his tone even, deliberate, and awareness changes behavior, whether you intend it to or not. I frowned slightly, processing that, because it sounded abstract, almost detached, but I could feel the truth in it, the way my thoughts had already shifted, the way I was replaying every detail of the past few days in a different light. You are saying I cannot unknow it, I said, quieter now, and he gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Exactly, he replied, and that single confirmation settled deeper than I expected, because it meant this was not something I could walk away from. Not completely. Not anymore. I glanced briefly toward the window, the rain now reduced to a faint trace against the glass, and for a second, I wished for something simple, something ordinary, but that feeling faded quickly, replaced by something sharper, more grounded. I looked back at him, holding his gaze. So what are my options? I asked, because if this was real, if this was happening, then I needed to know where the boundaries were, if there were any at all. He was quiet for a moment, longer than before, and I could see the calculation behind his stillness, the way he was weighing possibilities, outcomes, consequences I could not see. You limit what you say, he said finally, his voice steady. You ignore what does not concern you, even if you notice it. I let out a small breath, shaking my head slightly. That is not really an option, I said. That is just pretending. He tilted his head slightly, studying me again, and there was something in his expression that felt different, less distant, more focused. It is survival, he corrected, and the word landed the same way it had before. Heavy, unavoidable. I crossed my arms lightly, grounding myself again, because I could feel the tension shifting into something else now, something more controlled, more deliberate. And if I do that? I asked, then what? His gaze held mine, steady, unwavering, and for a moment, I thought he might not answer, but then he spoke, quieter than before. Then you remain outside of it, he said, and there was something in the way he said it that made it sound like the best outcome I was going to get. I nodded slowly, taking that in, because it was not a solution, not really, but it was something, a boundary, a direction, even if it was one I did not like. And if I do not? I asked, because I needed to hear it, needed to understand the full weight of this. He did not hesitate this time, his answer immediate, certain. Then you become part of the pattern, he said, and the words settled into the room with a quiet finality that made my chest tighten, because I understood what that meant, not completely, not in detail, but enough to know it was not something I wanted. I let out a slow breath, my mind moving quickly now, piecing things together, searching for something solid to hold on to. And then it hit me, a question I had not asked yet, something that had been sitting just beneath the surface this entire time. And you? I said, my voice steady as I met his gaze again. Where do you stand in all of this? For the first time since he walked in, there was a pause that felt different, not calculated, not controlled, just a fraction of a second where something shifted in him, something less certain, and when he answered, his voice was quieter than before, but no less real. I am the one who decides where the pattern leads. And that answer changed everything again, because it meant I was not just dealing with something unseen, something abstract. I was standing in front of it, looking directly at it. And somehow, that made it harder to breathe than anything else he had said so far. His answer stayed in the air, heavy, deliberate, impossible to ignore. And for a moment, I just stood there, looking at him in a way I had not before, not as a stranger who had stepped into my apartment, not even as someone dangerous in the way I first understood it, but as something more precise, more controlled, someone who did not just react to the world around him, but shaped it, adjusted it, directed it without hesitation. And that realization settled into me with a quiet intensity that made everything else fade for a second. You decide. I repeated softly, not as a question, but as a way to understand the weight of it, because if that was true, then everything he had said so far carried more meaning than I had allowed myself to see. He did not respond immediately, his gaze steady, watching me in that same measured way. like he was tracking the shift in my thinking as it happened, and I realized he was. He had been from the beginning, every reaction, every word, every pause. None of it had gone unnoticed. Then this was never about a warning, I said slowly, the pieces falling into place in a way that felt almost inevitable now. You were not just making sure I stayed out of it. I took a small breath, holding his gaze, refusing to look away. You were deciding if I should. The silence that followed was not empty. It was confirmation, not spoken, but understood. And that changed something in me again, something quieter but stronger. Because fear had a way of fading when replaced with clarity, even if that clarity was not what I wanted. You listened before you ever walked in here. I continued, my voice steady, more certain now. You already knew how I think, how I react. I tilted my head slightly, studying him the same way he had studied me. So you were not just observing, you were evaluating. A faint shift crossed his expression then, subtle but real, like I had stepped closer to something he had not intended to fully reveal, but he did not deny it, did not correct me, and that was enough. I let out a slow breath, grounding myself in the realization, because it meant this moment was not random. None of it was, not the voice behind the door, not the way he had spoken, not even the timing of it. So what did you decide? I asked, and this time the question felt different, not uncertain, not reactive, but deliberate, like I was stepping into the space he had been controlling and claiming a part of it for myself. He was quiet for a moment, longer than before, and I could see it now, the calculation behind his stillness, not because he did not have an answer, but because he was choosing how to give it, and that meant it mattered. You are not predictable, he said finally, his voice low, measured, and something in. The way he said it made it sound less like an observation and more like a conclusion. I exhaled slowly, processing that, because it was not what I expected, not exactly. That is your answer? I asked, one brow lifting slightly, and for the first time, there was something in his expression that almost resembled a hint of something else, not quite approval, not quite concern, something in between. It is. Why you are still standing here, he replied, and those words settled deeper than I wanted them to, because they carried an implication I could not ignore. I was still here because of a decision he had made, and that meant there had been another possibility, one he had chosen not to follow. I held his gaze, steady, unflinching, because if this was about decisions, then I needed to understand mine just as clearly as his. Then let me make one thing clear, I said, my voice calm, controlled. I did not choose to be part of this. The words hung there, firm, undeniable, and for a moment, the room felt balanced again, like something had shifted back in my favor. Even if only slightly, he watched me, his expression unreadable for a long second, and when he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than before, but no less certain. No, he said, but you chose not to run. And that answer landed in a way that made my chest tighten, not from fear, but from the realization of it. Because he was. Right? I had stayed. I had questioned. I had pushed instead of pulling away. And somehow, that had changed everything. Not just for me, but for him too. And in that moment, I understood something that felt both unsettling and undeniable. This was no longer just about what he decided. It was about what I did next, and whether or not I even realized it. I had already started shaping that outcome myself. The realization did not fade. It settled deeper, steady and undeniable, like something inside me had shifted into place without asking permission. I stood there, holding his gaze, no longer trying to step back from what this was, because I could feel it now. The way this moment had already changed the direction of everything that came after it, not just for me, but for him too. And that was the part that mattered. That was the part one could use. I let out a slow breath, grounding myself, because if this was about decisions, then I needed to make mine as clearly as he made his. Then, maybe staying was not the mistake you think it was, I said, my voice calm, measured, and for the first time, there was a pause in him that felt real, not calculated, not controlled, just a fraction of a second where something did not immediately align with what he expected. His eyes narrowed slightly, not in warning, but in focus, like he was adjusting again, recalculating something that had just changed. You assume it was not, he replied, but there was less certainty in it than before, and I caught that, held on to it, because it meant the balance was not fixed, not completely, I took a small step forward, not enough to close the distance, just enough to shift the space between us again, to show I was not retreating, not anymore. You said I noticed things. I continued, keeping my voice steady, even as my pulse remained sharp beneath the surface. Then notice this. I tilted my head slightly, meeting his gaze without hesitation. You are still here, and not because you have to be. The silence that followed was different, heavier, because this was not a question, it was an observation, and it landed the way I intended it to. He did not respond immediately, and that pause told me everything I needed to know. I exhaled slowly, feeling the shift settle into something more solid, more real. If I was just a risk, I said quietly, you would have already made that decision. I did not need to say what decision, not out loud, not directly. The meaning was clear without it. His gaze stayed on mine, steady, unreadable for a long moment, and then something in it changed, just slightly, not softer, not weaker, but more deliberate, like he was no longer just evaluating me. He was considering something else entirely, something new. You are not wrong, he said finally, his voice lower now, more controlled in a different way, and those words settled into the space between us with a weight that felt almost equal to his earlier certainty. I let out a small breath, not relief, not exactly, but something closer to understanding, because that confirmation mattered. It meant I was no longer just reacting to his decisions. I was influencing them, even if only in small ways. Then what changed? I asked, and this time the question was not about fear, not about survival. It was about clarity, about understanding the line we were both standing on now. He was quiet again, and this pause felt longer, heavier, like whatever answer he was about to give carried more weight than the others. His gaze did not leave mine, and for the first time since he walked in, there was something there that felt less like control and more like choice. You did, he said finally, and the simplicity of it made it land harder than anything else could have. I felt my breath catch, just slightly, because I understood what he meant, not in full detail, not yet, but enough. Enough to know that this was no longer about avoiding something. It was about becoming something else. Within it, something neither of us had planned for. I held his gaze, steady, unflinching, because if that was true, then this moment was not just a turning point for me. It was one for him too, and that meant the next move mattered more than anything that had come before it. Then maybe you should reconsider what you are deciding, I said quietly, and the words felt different, not like a challenge, not like defiance, but like an offer, something placed carefully between us, something that could shift the direction of everything that followed. The room went still again, the faint sound of rain barely audible now. And in that silence, I realized something that changed the way I saw him completely. He was not just deciding what to do with me. He was deciding whether or not to let something new exist in a world that did not allow for it. And somehow, without meaning to, I had become the center of that decision. The silence hung between us, thick with understanding, because I knew now, more than I ever had before, that this was no longer just about me, about what I chose or what I could control. It was about something bigger, something I was now a part of, whether I liked it or not. This was no longer just a crossroads. It was the path. The moment when everything shifted and nothing could return to what it had been before. I watched him carefully, feeling the weight of this shift in ways I could not explain, but I could feel it pressing against the walls of the room, pressing into me. What happens now? I asked, my voice quieter now, but no less certain, because the answer no longer mattered to just him. It mattered to me too. He paused, not for effect, but because he knew, just as I did, that the decision we were both about to make would be the one that decided what came next for both of us. Now, he said, his voice steady, but there was something softer in it now, something almost reluctant. You understand what you have become a part of. And those words were heavier than anything else he had said. He was not just acknowledging the inevitable. He was accepting it too. The room felt smaller, but not in a suffocating way, not anymore. It felt like there was space, space to move, space to think, space to decide. And I am part of it because I stayed, I said slowly, like I was putting the pieces together, like I was finally seeing the full picture. He nodded, just once, a sharp, decisive movement, but there was no arrogance in it. Just clarity. I held his gaze for a long moment, not as someone afraid, not as someone caught in something I didn't understand, but as someone who was beginning to understand it all. He wasn't controlling me, not in the way I thought he had been. He had been showing me what I had already stepped into. And now you are choosing how to move forward, I said, my voice steady, because now, for the first time, I felt like I truly had a choice. The fear that had once gripped me started to slip away. It wasn't that the situation had changed, it was that I had changed. I was seeing it differently now. I was standing in it, not running from it, not trying to avoid it. Exactly, he said, his tone softening. And for the first time, I saw something in him that wasn't just strategic, wasn't just about control, it was human. The kind of human that made choices, that knew the cost of those choices. And in that moment, I realized something. Life is not just about what we avoid. It is about what we choose to stand in, what we decide to confront, no matter how difficult it may be. We can be caught in patterns, or we can choose to break them. We can shrink away from fear, or we can use it to drive us forward, towards something greater. The choice is always ours. And even when the world around us feels like it's spinning out of control, we always have the power to decide what comes next. So take control of your own path. Decide what role you want to play in the world, and don't let anyone else's choices dictate your own. The future is in your hands.